If you're a millennial woman over 35 and from the outside your life looks like everything is fine, but somewhere inside you carry a feeling of incompleteness you cannot explain, maybe there is a name for it that no one ever taught you. Sometimes, for a second, you meet yourself in the dark screen of your phone and you cannot remember how long the eyes looking back at you have seemed this tired. The question is not really, am I young or am I old? The question is closer to, where am I in this life? You may look as if you have lost nothing, and still the feeling of not having arrived anywhere doesn't leave you. You are in a place you cannot describe out loud, so the answers remain suspended in the air. Things are fine, time passes, days, months go by. Everyone thinks she has somehow figured out her life, but somewhere inside you, the question you keep trying to answer is clear. Why do I still feel like two different women? One is the woman you were taught to be, the other is the woman quietly beginning to transform that old identity. And maybe the most exhausting part is feeling as if you are still carrying the weight of both alone. If you were born somewhere between 1981 and 1991, I'm sure this feeling is familiar. You are now a millennial woman beyond 35, and for years you may have noticed that you're not moving at the same pace as the people around you. Somehow you made it this far. But now you seem to have shifted into a completely different frequency. You hear the same sound everyone else hears, but the echo inside you works a little differently. You may not feel fully at home in your mother's world, built around the values of an older world shaped by sacrifice. Because some of the things the older generation saw as normal now feel heavy to you. But you also cannot fully place yourself in the world of women younger than you, because the words they heard much earlier you learned by living, breaking, getting tired, and losing. You were told, on one side, to be agreeable, on the other, you were expected to be free. This feeling of being in between is not a flaw in your personality. It is the psychology of growing up where two different ideas of womanhood touch each other. This is why women born between 1981 and 1991 became adults between the values of the old world and the possibilities of the new one. This is what the video is really about. So many millennial women live with a kind of tiredness that doesn't look like a problem from the outside, but is constantly felt inside and has no language. Life continues in its usual routine. You're handling everything well. The woman people see from the outside looks perfectly fine. No problem is visible. The smiles are in place, but in the background, there is an invisible energy that keeps draining you. It feels like a hum eating away at you from within. You may look as if you have lost nothing, and still you feel as if you have not arrived anywhere. You're never fully satisfied with yourself because the issue is not personal. These women are children of a transition period. They grew up inside an emotional model that required sacrifice and agreeableness, but when they became adults, the modern world changed what it expected from them. The old world gave her duties, the new world gave her choices, but no one taught her how to carry both in the same body. It's like an identity built on a fault line, slowly beginning to make its way felt. But this is not a collapse, it's a woman beginning to read her own life from a more honest place for the first time. And once you see that, you can no longer blame yourself the way you used to. Look at how she was raised. Most things were never spoken out loud. There were rules told in whispers, and she learned what the silence in a room was trying to say. Be agreeable, manage the atmosphere, become the buffer who gives up parts of herself to prevent storms at home. Be the one who softens the room without hurting anyone. Be patient, warm, good. She thought a good woman was a woman whose own needs didn't change the temperature of the room. What was passed down to her was not just advice, it was a quiet discipline of womanhood, carried from one generation to the next. None of this was directly cruelty. Maybe that is why it was harder. It was an emotional captivity hidden behind good intentions. It was an old recipe the women before her had learned in order to survive, then left for her as an inheritance. And then the hidden side of the story appears because she came to understand certain concepts much later. By the time she heard the word burnout, she had already started to think her tiredness was part of her character. She often learned that wanting emotional safety was not selfish only after she had given up on herself. By the time she learned how to set boundaries, her boundaries had already been crossed for years. Even naming her own needs required her to get past the guilt first. By the time these words became part of everyday life, she had already built a life without them. She realized how deep her own silence was only when she started trying to come out of that silence. She could not fully meet the expectations of the old world, and she could not immediately settle into the language of freedom offered by the new one. This is exactly where the heart of the problem is. It was not because she had failed. She found herself inside a conflict of roles. She had two different rule books in her hands. According to the old one, she was expected to manage everything and be agreeable. She was asked to put other people first. The new one asked her to set boundaries, stand strongly on her own feet, be ambitious, be free, and present an identity that chose herself. She was expected to hold two completely opposite women in the same body. And no one said the life we prepared you for is no longer the same as the life we now expect from you. Caught between two generations, she still sent the bill to herself. But this in betweenness was never about her character. It was the result of trying to create an impossible balance in a world whose expectations kept changing. She was expected to build her own life. She was expected to have financial power, a career, and perhaps a kind of freedom no woman in her family had ever experienced before. And she met those expectations as well as she could. But the invisible role of emotional manager never left her. It was nothing more than the old role with new responsibilities added on top. Because the strong woman standing on her own feet was still carrying the sensitive, thoughtful, flawless woman who monitored everyone's mood and tried to be there for everyone. Double the effort, double the shift. Behind the polished image of an independent woman, there was an emotional burden inherited from generations before her. The people around her have all kinds of theories about her. Too free, too complicated, too sensitive, sometimes too indecisive because she notices every detail. But what they are really doing is this: they don't see the maze the system created, so they call the woman exhausted from constantly searching for a way out, indecisive. But in reality, that woman is aware of everything. She is also aware that every path she chooses comes with a cost, and sometimes that awareness does not set her free. It makes the way even heavier. So at this point, I want to ask you, which burden feels heaviest on you? The pressure to keep up with everything, the effort to look flawless despite everything, or the desire to be loved by everyone? Let's be honest each other. There was no version of life without a cost. If you got married, it meant giving up more parts of your life. If you stayed single, it meant fighting the world's pressure to see you as somehow incomplete. If you wanted a career, the cost was not being able to rest. If you slowed down, there was the fear of losing the identity you had built. No path was completely free. Every choice was also leaving behind. And I wonder, at the end of the day, when you wipe off your makeup and look at yourself in the mirror, do you ever ask if there is another version of you somewhere inside? A calmer, quieter version, a woman living a life where she does not feel forced to obey the rules, a life she has not even allowed herself to say out loud. Under all of this lies an identity fatigue no one really takes into account. It's not about not knowing who you are, it comes from carrying a different version of yourself into every room, almost like a chameleon. You divide yourself across too many roles. A different you for your family, for your partner, for your friends, a different you for social media, for your boss. At every doorway, you become another woman. Because that is what is expected of you. You become divided into so many roles that your own turn never comes. And you are left with neither the time nor the courage to be alone with the real you in your most bare and unperformed form. She grew up as an analog child. She didn't grow up in public. She comes from a time when she had the luxury of making mistakes freely without being caught by the lens of a camera. Her teenage memories belong to a private time when every version of her was not recorded. She was one of the last children of an era when diaries were kept in locked notebooks and aesthetic anxiety was not as defining as it is today. Then things change. At some point in her adulthood, the world declared its transparency. Every breakup, every relationship, every promotion, every trip, every new beginning fell onto screens ready to be compared. But the old, protected girl still living inside her did not deserve this much open competition or this shallow kind of measurement. And yet, every time she looks at the phone in her hand, she finds herself on that side of the scale. If you really think about it, this tiredness doesn't always arrive through big crises. It slips into your life through ordinary moments, in the huge sense of relief you feel when plans get cancelled. In opening a dating app because part of you wants to meet someone, then closing it within seconds only 2 minutes later. In those few minutes you spend in the car before going inside, taking deep breaths, trying to prepare yourself to play the next role well. In the modern loneliness that deepens inside a pool of endless options. In the I'm fine smile you put on automatically, even when you know, deep in your soul, how tired you are. In seeing a friend's post and suddenly weighing your own life against it. Be honest, which one of these felt like it belonged to you? Some evenings, a heavy stone settles right in the middle of her chest. For years, she thought this feeling was regret, but she mistook for regret was actually something closer to quietly grieving the lives she didn't choose. As a woman gets older, she begins to carry not only what she has done, but also what she could not do. The law she gave up while choosing the sensible path, the country she never moved to, the artist inside her that she put on a shelf, the selves she left behind for the sake of a safer life, and yet every life she chose asked her to quietly bury a few other lives. These were not wrong choices. They were simply proof that she had made choices. And this major grief she was living through was nothing more than silently honoring the selves she had to leave behind so that life could exist. The independence the new system pushed on her really did work. It saved her. It kept her standing on her own feet. It taught her that she didn't have to depend on anyone and that there was always a way out in life. It became the armor she wore to survive, but the thing that protected her slowly turned into something else. She was standing at the very heart of the paradox. She began to live with the loneliness of a strength that had forgotten how to ask for help. Because when a woman can solve every crisis alone, people eventually stop offering help and you stopped asking too. Because people began to think you would never break. That space we call freedom slowly turned into a deep loneliness, one that no longer knew how to let tenderness and love in. Some nights are hard. She asks herself, am I lost? Why am I like this? But maybe that is not the right question. Being lost is not the same as realizing that the life no longer fits you. What she feels is this knowing where she is, but questioning whether she belongs there. That is a powerful psychological difference. This is not such much a crisis as a delayed inner reckoning. It's not easy to see that the life she spent years building, stitch by stitch, was built around pleasing other people. This is not a collapse, it's an honest confession, a moment of awakening. The beginning of the lightness that comes from finally looking at the stranger in the mirror and saying, I see you. Please listen carefully to this. You're not behind anyone. Step out of the illusion that everyone else has figured everything out and you are the only one left on the road. You are simply a remarkable woman trying to move through a new world with old rules. You didn't lose your values. You are only beginning to understand which ones truly belong to you. You're not falling apart. You're becoming a woman who is more honest with herself. You're living the quiet beginning of a life that is more truthful and more your own. Can we meet in the comments below? Did you grow up feeling trapped between the person you were taught to be and the person you are quietly becoming? Even one sentence is enough. Someone reading it may feel less alone because you said it. And if this video gave language to a feeling you have carried in silence for years, stay with quietly her for a while. There is no rush here, only a quiet place where you may finally feel understood.